everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here, I'm John Sneisen, and more ridiculous claims about Bitcoin come forward. It just, the attempts to spread FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that is on the markets with crazy, stupid news stories never ceases to amaze me, because you look at things in the past, the fake stories about India banning Bitcoin, the fake stories about South Korea banning Bitcoin, the fake stories about these guys regulating, these guys taxing this thing.
Or Poland blatantly paying people to put up fake YouTube videos.
Yeah, exactly. And just the fact that they're always nonsense stories meant to scare people, really market manipulation in the end. Same thing as, Twitter's Jack Dorsey saying Bitcoin, attacking Bitcoin using Twitter, banning crypto ads at the same time as buying amazing amounts of it himself. It's market manipulation, word of mouth market manipulation. And we got this news story here at bitcoinmanager.com, and it says Bitcoin is wrongly linked to mass money laundering, says Canadian chief scientist. And as it goes into here, and I quote, Quebec government chief scientist declares that Bitcoin is not used for money laundering, unlike cash, and has almost no impact on criminal activity. And to translate a little bit of what he says, and to badly translate it, I should say, using Google Translate, it says, every transaction is transparent and public. They are indeed recorded in a kind of ledger whose copies are distributed among thousands of computers. No kidding. Confirms Jonathan Hamill, associate researcher at the Montreal Economic Institute. An illegal transaction would be easy to link to its users. Specialized firms already offer such a service to the financial authorities who would like to trace the perpetrators of suspicious transactions. That being said, like other financial means, Bitcoins are not immune to bad trading and can be diverted from primary investment functions, said Jonathan Hamill. And I'd like to quickly mention the fact that this idea that people are mass money laundering, not that I have anything against that, to avoid your money being stolen from the government, that's not such a bad thing, but the notion is absurd when you consider it the fact that it's much easier to escape things using cash rather than a digital currency that can be traced everywhere. Now, I will say that recently it did come out that according to Credit Karma, 0.04% of people are actually reporting their Bitcoin to the IRS. Well, yeah, because maybe they don't like the fact that the government is stealing that which they worked hard for. It doesn't amaze me that people don't like their money being stolen by government. And that's just one of the first story we're going into. But first, I'll let John go into that before we go into the next story.
Yeah, well, it also talks about in this article about how Lagarde, of course, called for regulation. Now, of course, the regulation works so very well in the IMF, where you have all this corrupt loans. So it's just utter bullshit to try to regulate anything. And then, of course, it's just really hilarious, the stats that came out for Credit Karma. It just shows you how little people are starting to care about how terrible the government are treating them, because we are paying mass amounts of money to a government that gives us very little back of good quality service. So people are getting really fed up with anything that has to do with the government. And it's really funny how, the scientists, the people that are really, out there that's supposed to, be there for the government, they're saying that, you can't use this as a money laundering mechanism because you can trace it. If you find the guy's wallet address, you can easily trace him. So it's such a crazy way of, these people coming out, the big guys, saying, oh yeah, money laundering. No, it cannot. Like, you got to remember, there's over, last time I looked at it, over $3 trillion that we used for money laundering. And this was in 2013 when I actually did my first presentation at a Bitcoin called CoinFest in 2014. And it was very interesting. We talked about how, because that was one of the first things that I was asked too about money laundering, and I came up with that fact, and then people were just their jaw dropped to the floor because they were not aware of how much money that was getting used by just cash, by well, of course, the government has a solution for that. Now they're going to ban cash.
Yeah, well, and of course, that's the big issue here, is going into the centrally planned cashless society, but there is a decentralized monetary revolution happening before us without a shot being fired. And this other story that I have from CNBC says, how Bitcoin is fueling America's opioid crisis. Drug dealers are using Bitcoin to finance a deadly wave of fentanyl flooding into the country from overseas. Now, first of all, I think that's another example of the nonsense within the media of spreading FUD, because obviously when it comes down to it, But yeah, when it comes down to it, yeah, people are going to buy drugs either way, regardless of prohibition. It's unenforceable, these regulations and attacks on cryptocurrencies. It's absurd. And on top of that, people will use cash more likely to buy fentanyl. Why would they buy it with something that's so insanely traceable, especially when there's such a huge risk of death if you take fentanyl? Why would the dealer want to draw all the arrows straight to him?
You know what's fueling the opioid crisis? It's of course, you know what happened in Afghanistan, like after the U.S. military took over. Suddenly, it was 5% of all heroin came from Afghanistan. Now 95% comes in. Maybe I think it was who was saying that, you know, instead of giving the military over their guns to protect the poppy fields, just give them flamethrowers. It was it's the same thing. Like
it's the CIA drug running that we've been seeing for so long. And that brings me to another point, John, because you mentioned Afghanistan. So what I find hilarious is the other claim that Bitcoin is funding terrorism. Now, I've gone over this a few times before. 99.999% of all funding for terrorism, people use fiat for it. And why? And mostly it would be government that's funding terrorism. The biggest culprit in almost all these cases is government. Not Bitcoin. Not Bitcoin. The absurdity, just looking back at a story where there was a woman who got caught for using Bitcoin to send over to ISIS. She got caught like immediately and people were like, well, why would she use Bitcoin? It literally is traced back to you in seconds. If you've ever used a bank account to put money into your Bitcoin wallet, etc., and not just gotten donations, it's really easy to trace. And just looking at the fact that government is the biggest sponsor of terrorism and fiat, 99% of money that goes to terrorists is in fiat. Maybe we should ban fiat. Well, no, let's just stop using legal tender laws. Let's allow competing currencies to take over. Decentralization, not central planning, not enforcement, not coercive enforcement by a collective cartel, a criminal racket we call government. We need to start decentralizing and being individuals and not looking to giant collectives. The whole idea here is they try to spread this FUD, but the FUD isn't working because people are seeing through it. They can only come up with so many countries to fakely say that they are banning or regulating Bitcoin in this way or another, or all cryptocurrencies in general. It's a big trick in order to push people away from that, which is pulling people away from the central banking system.
Well, talking about Lagarde and, you know, wanting to say that we need to regulate Bitcoin, you know, can be used, and people are saying that it can be used to terrorism. You know, the SDR was actually used to, it was borrowed money to Ukraine during the crisis there, and that actually was Jim Rickards that was saying that was a blatant, you know, funding arms deal that they made with Ukraine, and that was made through the IMF. Maybe we should remove the IMF, and maybe we should get rid of, like, with the removal of the IMF, I believe money laundering would severely drop, because this corrupt organization, and together with the United Nations, you know, the world will be so much better, and then we could just deconstruct everything. You know, this world government push that they're desperately trying to get this, and that's why, of course, Lagarde said that she likes Bitcoin and blockchain, because she wants, it's just like you could just see her drooling, you know, when she's sitting at home just thinking about those ideas of world domination. And of course, what we need to do is what Josh said, you got to have a free market, complete free market of everything, and removal of any government control.
Yeah, and again, I have nothing against money laundering. I think money laundering is a great thing. It's just funny.
If you don't have a government,
well, yeah, that's what's funny though, is when the regulators do it, despite attacking other people and throwing them in jail for it. It's the same thing as the police smoking pot while throwing people in jail for it. It's absurd. Prohibition doesn't work. Individualism does. And just looking at the idea that perhaps, just maybe, the creation of fiat currency in the first place is terrorism, and also to look at what funds these wars, what pushes these wars, what perpetuates these wars, the monetary system. The monetary system needs a war, and the idea that every time that the economy gets bad, we see major wars. We could see World War I, we could see World War II, Korean War, we could see Vietnam, we could see just after the 1987 crisis we saw what happened in Iraq, the Gulf War. We've seen the Cold War in the past as well. We've seen the Arab Spring, we've seen the Iraq War, we've seen the Afghanistan War, we've seen Libya. Now we see this push for Syria and Russia. I mean, come on, folks, how obvious does it get? Cryptocurrencies are a revolution, and they could literally potentially end war if we do our our own due diligence and we don't allow things to be centralized, we must decentralize and be free and rule ourselves.
Yeah, well, all of that, what Josh was mentioning, those wars, that was financial terrorism. And who are the biggest terrorists on this planet? It's the banksters that are running the whole system, that are printing all this money and borrowing it out for people to go and blow up everybody all around the world.
And the governments who go and actually do the blowing up of everyone in the world and call, a one situation with a few dozen dead a reason to go kill millions. This is the insanity of these people. These are psychopaths that are behind these initiatives. And we need to look towards things like gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies to break free from that pyramid, and it must collapse. Thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the ADL comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. Also, check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also find us at steemit.com at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in Steem, the cryptocurrency. And also find us at the Red Pill Expo, which we have a reference link for below in the description and the comments as well. Hosted by G. Edward Griffin, amazing speakers coming out to speak this year. Don't miss it. It's in Spokane, Washington, June 21st to 23rd. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Thank you.